My daughter, Lena, the child I once taught how to tell the difference between a poison ivy leaf and a harmless Virginia creeper, tried to bury me alive. She didn't use a shovel, not a real one anyway. Her shovel was a full tank of gas, a set of convincing lies, and the beautiful, terrible wilderness of the Appalachian Mountains. She drove me to my grave, a place I had once called my heaven, and she left me there to be swallowed by the earth. She only started to scream when the first small, neat cardboard box arrived at her pristine city apartment, filled with the dark, rich, loamy soil from the very spot where she had left me to die. Hi everyone, I'm Grandma Iris. My name is Iris Thorne. I'm 79 years old, and my entire life has been a conversation with the earth. I'm a retired botanist. Not a fancy university professor, but a field botanist, a woman who spent 40 years working for the Forestry Service, walking the quiet, green cathedrals of our national parks. My hands are not soft. They are mapped with the fine lines of 1,000 thorns and the stubborn stains of soil and chlorophyll. I know the secret names of things that grow in the shadows. I know which roots you can eat, which leaves can soothe a fever, which berries will kill you. I know how to listen to the whispers of the woods. This is the story of how that knowledge, the quiet wisdom I had accumulated over a lifetime, was all that stood between me and a slow, lonely death. And it's the story of how I used the very earth she chose for my tomb as the instrument of my cold, patient, and relentless revenge. This is a story that smells of damp soil and decaying leaves, of fear and survival. It is a secret I have kept locked away, for who would believe such a tale? They found me, of course. They called me a survivor, a victim, a miracle. They never knew I was also a predator, a patient hunter, stalking my own child through the United States Postal Service. Before I take you back to that remote cabin in the woods, I ask you to lend me your strength. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Knowing you are out there, that my story is taking root in your minds, gives me the courage to unearth this terrible memory. To understand how a daughter could do this, you must understand the wilderness that was already growing inside her. My Lena was not born a monster. She was my beautiful, complicated, wild-hearted girl. Her father, my husband Ben, was a park ranger, a man as quiet and as sturdy as the old-growth oaks he protected. We raised Lena in a world of green. Her lullabies were the songs of whip-poor-wills and the rustle of wind in the pines. Her playground was 100,000 acres of national forest. She knew how to build a fire, how to read a compass, how to live in harmony with the natural world. I thought I had given her roots. I thought I had taught her how to be strong, self-sufficient, grounded. But sometime after she left for the city, for college, and then a fast-paced career in public relations, she began to lose her connection to the earth. She started to value things that were shiny, expensive, and man-made. Her life became a curated collection of designer clothes, exclusive restaurants, and exotic vacations she couldn't really afford. She was trying to build a new identity, one that had no trace of the dirt of her childhood under its fingernails. Our relationship, once as easy and natural as a flowing stream, became strained. Our phone calls were filled with her breathless accounts of office politics and her complaints about money. Always, always about money. She was living a life far beyond her means, a life built on a precarious foundation of credit card debt and personal loans. I tried to warn her, to offer the simple wisdom of my own life. Live simply, want less, find joy in things that do not have a price tag. But she heard my advice as criticism. She saw my simple, debt-free life not as a success, but as a failure of ambition. "You don't understand, Mom," she'd say, her voice tight with a frustration that bordered on contempt. "This is how the world works now. It's about image. It's about connections. You have to spend money to make money." Yes. I would look out my window at my small, prosperous garden, at the sturdy brick house that was paid for in full, and I would feel a deep, sorrowful pity for my daughter, who had become a stranger to the very concept of true wealth. The last time I saw her before the end, she had come to me to ask for money. It was a significant amount, more than I could comfortably give. She was vague about the reasons, mentioning a bad investment and temporary cash flow problems. I knew it was more than that. I could see the frantic, hunted look in her eyes, the same look a deer gets when it knows the wolves are closing in. I loved her. She was my child. So I gave her what she asked for. I drained a large portion of my retirement savings, the money Ben and I had so carefully put away for my old age, and I gave it to her. "This has to be the last time, Lena," I said, my voice gentle but firm, as I handed her the check. "You are living on a cliff's edge. You need to find solid ground." She hugged me, her body tense, her gratitude feeling thin and brittle. "I will, Mom," she promised. "This will fix everything. I promise. I'll pay you back every penny." That was 6 months before she tried to kill me. The idea for the trip came out of the blue. She called me, her voice brighter and more cheerful than it had been in years. "Mom, I have the most wonderful surprise for you," she chirped. "I'm taking next week off. Just you and me. We're going to go on a road trip, a mother-daughter adventure. We'll go see the fall colors in the mountains. We'll go back to the old cabin." The cabin? The word sent a jolt of pure, painful nostalgia through me. It was a small, rustic cabin my Ben had built on a piece of land he'd inherited deep in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. It was our sanctuary, our escape. It had no electricity, no running water, just a wood stove, a well pump, and a profound, beautiful silence. We hadn't been there in years, not since Ben died. The thought of going back, of seeing it again, was both heartbreaking and beautiful. "Oh, Lena," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I don't know." "It'll be perfect," she insisted, her cheerfulness relentless. "We'll pack a cooler with food. We'll build a fire. We'll tell stories. It'll be like old times. A real chance to reconnect. I've already booked a rental SUV. I'll be there to pick you up on Friday." "Elio." My caution, my unease, was drowned out by a wave of desperate hope. This was it. This was the breakthrough I had been praying for. My daughter wanted to reconnect. She wanted to return to the simple, earthy values of her childhood. She wanted her mother back. My heart, a foolish, eternally hopeful mother's heart, swelled with love. Of course, I would go. The Friday she arrived, she was a whirlwind of manufactured enthusiasm. She bustled around my small house, helping me pack a bag, her movements quick and efficient. She seemed different. Her eyes were overly bright, her smile a little too wide. I attributed it to excitement. I see now that it was the high-strung energy of a predator closing in on its prey. We loaded the large, comfortable SUV. She had brought coolers filled with food and water, sleeping bags, lanterns. She had thought of everything. It all seemed so perfect, so well planned. The drive into the mountains was beautiful. The autumn foliage was at its peak, a breathtaking tapestry of crimson, gold, and orange painted across the rolling hills. We listened to old songs on the radio and reminisced about her father, about camping trips we had taken when she was a little girl. For a few blissful hours, it felt real. It felt like I had my daughter back. We turned off the main highway onto a series of smaller, winding country roads, and then, finally, onto the old, unpaved logging track that led to the cabin. The road was overgrown, the ruts deep. The SUV handled it with ease. As we drove deeper into the woods, the silence grew, broken only by the crunch of leaves under our tires. The cabin appeared in a clearing, exactly as I remembered it, only smaller, grayer, more weathered. It looked like a natural part of the landscape, a stone that had grown out of the earth. My heart ached with a love so fierce, it was almost a pain. "Here we are," Lena said, her voice a little tight. She parked the car near the front porch. We spent the first hour unpacking, airing the cabin out. The inside smelled of dust, cedar, and cold, dead ashes in the wood stove. But it was a good smell. A smell of history. A smell of home. I walked through the small main room, running my hand over the rough-hewn table Ben had built, touching the stone of the fireplace he had laid. Every object was a memory. Lena was strangely quiet now, her earlier effervescence gone, replaced by a tense, watchful stillness. "I'm going to try the old well pump," I said, picking up the bucket. "See if I can get some water for washing up." "Good idea, Mom," she said, her eyes following my every move. I went outside to the old hand pump, a few yards from the cabin. It was rusted, but sturdy. I worked the handle, a familiar, rhythmic squeaking sound echoing in the quiet clearing. After a few minutes of effort, water, brown and silty at first, then clear and cold, gushed from the spout. I felt a surge of simple, profound satisfaction. The earth was still providing. I was carrying the full bucket back to the cabin when I heard it. The sound of the SUV's engine starting. I stopped, confused. I turned. Lena was in the driver's seat. She was not looking at me. She was staring straight ahead, her hands gripping the steering wheel, her knuckles white. "Lena," I called out, my voice wavering. "What are you doing?" She put the car in reverse. The wheels spun in the soft dirt, then caught. The big vehicle began to move backwards, away from me, away from the cabin. A cold, sick feeling of dread washed over me. This was wrong. Terribly wrong. "Lena, stop!" I screamed, my voice thin and reedy in the vast silence. I started to run towards the car, as fast as my old legs could carry me, the heavy bucket of water sloshing and spilling down my front. She didn't stop. She maneuvered the car back onto the narrow dirt track. She was leaving. I reached the spot where the car had been, my breath coming in ragged, panicked sobs. She stopped the car for a moment, the engine rumbling, about 50 yards away. She rolled down the window. Her face was a pale, emotionless mask. "Lena, for God's sake, what are you doing?" I cried, tears streaming down my face. "It's a joke, right? This is some kind of sick joke." "It's not a joke, Mom," she said, her voice a dead, flat thing, utterly devoid of the daughter I knew. It was the voice of a stranger, a cold, hard stranger. "The money's gone," she said, as if reciting a list of facts. "All of it. The money you gave me wasn't enough. I have debts, bad ones. People are looking for me. I need to disappear for a while, and I can't do that with you in my life. I can't afford you anymore. I can't afford your questions, your disappointment, your existence. But you can't just leave me here," I shrieked, the full, monstrous reality of the situation beginning to dawn on me. "There's no car, no phone. How will I get back?" A small, cruel smile touched her lips. "That's the point, Mom," she said. "You won't." She gestured vaguely at the cabin, at the surrounding wilderness. "This is where you were always happiest. With Dad, with your trees and your dirt. It's a beautiful place to rest. No one will ever find you here. No one even knows this place exists anymore. By the time they realize you're missing. By the time anyone even thinks to look here, it will be winter. It will all be better this way. Cleaner." The word hung in the cold, clean air. She was talking about my death. She was talking about leaving me here to die of starvation or exposure. She was burying me alive in my own memories. "I took your heart medication from your bag," she said, her voice still a chilling monotone. "And your purse, your phone, the car keys, the sleeping bags. All the food is in the cooler in the back of the car. I've thought of everything. I'm sorry, Mom, but my life is more important than yours right now." I just stared at her, my mind unable to process the sheer, sociopathic monstrosity of it. This was my child. My Lena, my beautiful, wild-hearted girl. "I love you," she said. The 3 most beautiful words in the English language turned into a final, obscene act of violence. Then she rolled up the window. The tinted glass reflected the trees, the sky, me. A small, pathetic, terrified old woman. She put the car in drive and pulled away, her tires spitting dirt and gravel. I stood there, soaked and shivering in the middle of the clearing, and I watched the car disappear down the track. I listened until the sound of its engine was swallowed by the vast, indifferent silence of the woods. And then I was alone. Utterly, completely, and terrifyingly alone. Alone in my own grave. The silence that descended after the sound of Lena's engine faded was a physical thing. It was a weight that pressed in on me, a vast, bottomless ocean of quiet that threatened to drown me. For how long I stood there I do not know. Time seemed to have stopped. The sun, which had been bright and cheerful, now seemed distant and cold. The vibrant autumn colors of the trees, which had filled my heart with such joy on the drive up, now looked like the mocking, painted faces of clowns at a funeral. My first coherent thought was not of survival. It was of my husband, Ben. Oh, Ben, I thought. A wave of grief so profound it buckled my knees. If you could see what our daughter has done. I sank to the damp, cold earth, the spilled water from the bucket soaking into my trousers, and I wept. I wept for my lost child, for the monstrous stranger she had become. I wept for my own foolish, trusting heart. I wept for the beautiful memories of this place, now tainted forever by this final, ugly act of betrayal. My tears were hot, angry, and utterly futile. They were a saltwater offering to a crime that had already been committed. The sun began to dip below the tree line, and the air grew instantly colder. The chill snapped me out of my stupor. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of my grief. I was a 79-year-old woman, alone, in the middle of a vast wilderness, with no food, no communication, and no shelter other than a cold, empty cabin. And my daughter had taken my heart medication. I had enough in my system to last me a day or two, perhaps, but after that, my own body would become my enemy. It was in that moment, faced with the stark, brutal reality of my situation, that another part of me began to stir. It was a part of me that had been dormant for years, buried under the soft comforts of modern life. It was the botanist. It was the survivor. It was the woman who had spent 40 years walking these mountains, who knew their secrets, who understood their language. My daughter had made a terrible, crucial mistake. She had chosen the wrong place to bury me. She thought she was leaving me in a grave. But she had, in fact, left me in my own garden. I stood up, my old bones aching, my body trembling with a mixture of fear and a new, unfamiliar sensation, resolve. The tears stopped. The time for weeping was over. The time for surviving had begun. My first priority was a mental inventory. What did I have? I had the clothes on my back, now damp and cold. I had a cabin, which offered shelter from the wind, but little else. I had a well with fresh, cold water. And I had my mind. My mind, filled with a lifetime of knowledge about this very ecosystem. What did I not have? Food. Warmth. What? Medicine. A way to contact the outside world. The odds were not good, but they were not zero. I forced myself to move. The sun was setting fast, and the temperature was dropping. The first rule of survival, Ben had always taught me, is to take care of immediate needs first. And the most immediate need was warmth. I went into the cabin. The air inside was frigid, colder even than the air outside. The stone fireplace, the heart of the cabin, was cold and dead. I needed a fire. I searched the cabin for matches, for a lighter, for anything that could create a spark. Lena, my thoughtful, meticulous daughter, had been thorough. There was nothing. I felt another wave of panic, but I beat it back. Think, Iris. Think like a scientist. Think like a survivor. Ben had taught me how to start a fire without matches. A bow drill. It was a difficult, laborious process, but not an impossible one. I needed a fireboard, a spindle, a bow, and a handhold. I went back outside into the twilight. I searched the woods around the cabin. I found a piece of dry, dead basswood for the fireboard and a straight, sturdy branch of hickory for the spindle. For the bow, I used the leather belt from my trousers, a sacrifice to the god of warmth. For the handhold, a smooth, comfortable river stone. It was almost dark by the time I had assembled my tools. My hands were clumsy with cold and age, but they remembered the motions. I knelt on the cold ground, my heart pounding with exertion and anxiety. I spun the spindle, the bow moving back and forth, my belt groaning in protest. For a long time, nothing happened. Just a wisp of smoke, a faint smell of scorching wood. My muscles screamed. Sweat, cold and clammy, ran down my back. I was about to give up, to surrender to the cold, when I saw it. A tiny glowing ember in the notch of my fireboard. I have never, in my long life, seen a more beautiful sight. I carefully transferred the ember to a small, fluffy nest of dry pine needles and birch bark I had gathered. I blew on it, gently, my breath a prayer. The ember glowed brighter. Then, with a soft whoosh, the tinder burst into flame. I fed the tiny, precious flame with small twigs, then larger branches, until I had a small, crackling fire going in the stone hearth. The warmth that spread through the cabin was more than just physical. It was the warmth of hope. It was the warmth of a small, crucial victory against the encroaching darkness. I had made fire. I had pushed back the night. I had survived my first test. The next few days were a blur of desperate, focused activity. My life shrank to a series of immediate, essential tasks. Water, die. Shelter, on town. Food out, one. Fire, These were the 4 pillars of my existence. Water was the easiest. The well pump, my Ben's sturdy, reliable creation, provided me with clean, cold water. It was my one luxury. Shelter was the cabin. It was drafty and cold, but it kept the wind and the rain at bay. I spent hours chinking the gaps between the logs with moss and mud. A slow, laborious process that left my hands raw and caked with dirt. Fire was my constant, demanding companion. I spent a large part of each day gathering firewood, my world defined by a search for dry, dead branches. The fire was my clock, my calendar, my only source of light and warmth in the long, cold nights. Food was the greatest challenge. The coolers were gone. The cabin was bare. My body, used to the soft, abundant food of modern life, was screaming in protest. The hunger was a physical pain, a hollow, aching void in my stomach. But here, in this, my daughter had made her most profound miscalculation. She had forgotten that I was a botanist. She had abandoned me in a larder. On the second day, driven by a hunger so intense it made me dizzy, I went foraging. I moved slowly through the woods, my eyes scanning the forest floor, not with the panicked gaze of a lost person, but with the focused, analytical eye of a scientist. I was not looking for a trail. I was looking for my allies. The plants. I found them everywhere. The broad, familiar leaves of the common plantain, a humble weed whose young leaves are edible and nutritious. I found a patch of dandelions, their bright yellow heads a cheerful splash of color against the brown forest floor. Their leaves were bitter, but boiled, they were a welcome green in my diet of nothing. My greatest triumph was finding a patch of cattails growing in a marshy area a half-mile from the cabin. The cattail is the supermarket of the wilderness. I dug up the thick, starchy rhizomes from the mud. Roasted in the embers of my fire, they tasted like a slightly stringy, earthy potato. It was the most delicious thing I had ever eaten. I found burdock root, chicory root, and wild onions. I found a handful of late-season blackberries, their sweetness and explosion of joy on my tongue. I was not feasting. I was surviving. But I was eating. I was fueling my body, keeping the machine running. My daughter had taken my heart medication. This was her cruelest stroke, the one most likely to kill me. I could feel the effects of its absence. My blood pressure, usually so well controlled, was now a wild, unpredictable thing. I would have dizzy spells. My heart would sometimes race with a frightening, fluttering rhythm. I knew this was my greatest vulnerability. So I turned to the forest pharmacy. I could not replicate my prescription medication, of course, but I could find things to help. I found the bark of a willow tree, the original source of aspirin, and I chewed on it to help thin my blood. I made a tea from hawthorn berries, a plant long known in folk medicine to support heart health. I did not know if it was helping scientifically, but it was an act of self-care, an act of defiance. It was me, using my knowledge to fight back against the death she had planned for me. The loneliness was a different kind of hunger, a different kind of cold. In the long, silent nights, with only the crackle of the fire for company, the full weight of my abandonment would press down on me. I would think of Lena, of her face in the car window, her eyes cold and empty, and the pain would be so intense. It was a physical thing. To combat the despair, I developed routines. I became a creature of ritual. I would wake with the sun. I would fetch water. I would gather firewood. I would forage for my meager meal. I would tend my fire. My days were hard, but they were purposeful. I talked to Ben. I would sit by the fire at night and tell him about my day. I would tell him about the taste of the roasted cattail roots. I would tell him about the beautiful, heartbreaking pattern of the frost on the morning leaves. I would tell him how much I missed him. And in the silence, I could almost hear his quiet, steady voice telling me, "You can do this, Iris. You're the strongest woman I know." I kept track of the days by making small scratches on one of the cabin's logs with a sharp stone. Each scratch was a victory. Each scratch was a day I had refused to die. I had been alone in the woods for 17 days when I saw the first sign of another human being. It was a footprint, a large, booted footprint in the mud by the stream where I gathered watercress. It was not mine. My first reaction was not joy, but a jolt of pure, animal fear. For 17 days, this wilderness had been my world. I was its sole inhabitant. The thought of another person, a stranger, intruding on my fragile existence was terrifying. What if they were hostile? What if they meant me harm? But the fear was quickly replaced by a surge of desperate hope. A person. A chance. A way out of this green tomb. I spent the rest of that day in a state of high alert, my ears straining for any sound that was not of the forest. I did not have to wait long. The next afternoon, I was gathering firewood near the edge of the clearing when I heard a sound that was not the wind or the birds. It was the soft, rhythmic tread of footsteps. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. I ducked behind a large pine tree, peering out. A man emerged into the clearing. He was a large, burly man, in his late 50s, dressed in camouflage gear, a hunting rifle slung over his shoulder. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who was at home in the woods. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, his eyes scanning the area. He saw the cabin. He saw the thin wisp of smoke rising from the stone chimney. A look of profound surprise crossed his face. He had clearly not expected to find this place occupied. He stood there for a long moment, assessing the situation. I held my breath. My life, I knew, was in this man's hands. He unslung his rifle and leaned it against a tree, a clear, deliberate gesture of peace. Then he raised a hand and called out, his voice a deep, gravelly baritone that echoed in the clearing. "Hello, the cabin. Is anyone home?" My voice, when I tried to answer, was a dry, rusty croak. I hadn't spoken to another human being in 18 days. I cleared my throat and tried again. "I'm here," I called out, my voice thin and wavering. I stepped out from behind the tree. He saw me, and his jaw dropped. He was clearly expecting a fellow hunter, a hiker, a woodsman. He was not expecting to see a frail, gaunt, wild-haired old woman emerge from the woods. I must have been a terrifying sight. I had lost at least 20 pounds. My clothes were torn and stained with dirt and berry juice. My face was thin and gaunt, my eyes huge in their sunken sockets. My hair was a tangled mat of gray. I was a creature of the wilderness, a ghost of the woman I had once been. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock, pity, and disbelief. "Ma'am," he said, his voice soft with astonishment. Are you all right?" And with those 4 simple, kind words, the dam inside me broke. The strength that had held me together for 18 days, the resolve, the anger, the sheer, stubborn will to survive, it all crumbled. I sank to my knees and began to sob, the dry, racking sobs of a person who had been to the edge of death and back. His name was George. He was a deer hunter who had been coming to these woods for 30 years. He thought he knew every cabin, every trail, every secret corner of this forest. He had never seen me or my cabin before. He had been tracking a buck and had stumbled upon my clearing by pure chance. Or, as I later came to believe, by providence. He was a kind, gentle man. He helped me back to the cabin. He gave me a piece of jerky from his pack, and the taste of the salted, cured meat was so intense, so overwhelmingly delicious. It was almost a religious experience. I tried to tell him my story, but my words were still a jumbled, slurred mess. He listened with a patient, compassionate gravity, piecing together the fragments of my tale. He understood enough. He understood that I had been abandoned. He understood that I had been left here to die. He had a satellite phone. He called the sheriff's department. He told them he had found a woman, an elderly woman, stranded in a remote cabin. He gave them the coordinates. A helicopter arrived 2 hours later, its whomp, 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 a deafening, beautiful, impossible sound in the quiet woods. They airlifted me to a hospital in the nearest town. I was diagnosed with severe malnutrition, dehydration, and exposure. But I was alive. As I was being strapped onto the gurney to be lifted into the helicopter, I did one last thing. I reached down and scooped up a handful of the dark, rich, loamy earth from the clearing. The earth that had sustained me. The earth that had been chosen for my grave. I clutched it in my hand, a final secret souvenir from my time in hell. My daughter had wanted to bury me. She had no idea that she had only succeeded in planting a seed. And that seed, watered by my tears and my rage, was about to grow into a strange and terrible harvest. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights, soft beds, and the blessed miraculous taste of real food. I was a medical curiosity. The story of the old woman, who survived for nearly 3 weeks alone in the wilderness, became a small, local news item. The official story, the one I allowed to be told, was that I had gone to the cabin for a nostalgic solo trip, and my car had broken down, leaving me stranded. I never mentioned Lena. Not to the police, not to the doctors, not to the kind social worker who was assigned to my case. This was not a matter for the law. The law would see a family dispute, a case of neglect perhaps, something to be mediated and settled with probation and court-ordered therapy. But what Lena had done was not a misdemeanor. It was a crime of the soul, and it required a punishment that the legal system could not provide. It required a punishment of the soul. My recovery was slow. My body had been pushed to its absolute limit. But as my physical strength returned, my mind, which had been so focused on the singular goal of survival, was now free to turn to its next great project, revenge. The social worker, a kind woman named Sarah, was trying to locate my daughter. "She must be worried sick about you, Iris," she'd say. I would just nod and give a weak, vague smile. Of course, Lena was unreachable. She wasn't answering her phone. She wasn't responding to emails. She was, as she had planned, making herself disappear, waiting for the news of my own disappearance to fade, for the forest to reclaim my body and her secret. She thought she was safe. She thought she was free. She had no idea that her forgotten mother was sitting in a hospital bed, eating Jell-O and meticulously planning her psychological destruction. My plan, like my survival, was rooted in the earth. It was a plan that required patience, precision, and a deep understanding of symbolism. The handful of dirt I had taken from the clearing was my most precious possession. I kept it in a small plastic specimen bag the hospital had given me. At night, I would hold it in my hand. It was not just dirt. It was a promise. It was evidence. It was the soil of my tomb and the seed of my vengeance. After 2 weeks, I was discharged from the hospital. I had nowhere to go. My house was gone. My daughter was a monster who had tried to murder me. I was, for all intents and purposes, homeless. The social worker, Sarah, found me a place in a small, clean, state-subsidized apartment for seniors. It was a tiny, sterile box, but it was safe. And it had a mailbox. My first order of business was to recover my strength and my resources. I was a botanist, but I was also a creature of the modern world. I knew how to use a computer. I went to the local library and, using my social security number, I began the slow process of reassembling my bureaucratic identity. I applied for a new driver's license, a new bank account. I contacted the Social Security Administration. During this process, I discovered the full extent of Lena's betrayal. It wasn't just the house. She had used her power of attorney, before abandoning me, to drain my bank accounts and cash in my pension bonds. She had taken everything. She had left me with nothing but the clothes on my back and a handful of dirt. The confirmation of this final, total betrayal did not break me. It hardened me. It polished my resolve to a fine, sharp point. My revenge required a few key components. First, I needed to know, with certainty, where Lena was living. Her social media, which had once been a vibrant stream of her glamorous life, had gone dark. She was laying low, waiting for the dust to settle. But she had made mistakes. In her earlier, boastful posts, she had tagged the name of her new luxury condo building in Charlotte. A few hours of online research, cross-referencing public records and resident directories, gave me what I needed: her new address, her apartment number. Second, I needed supplies. I went to the post office, and I bought a large roll of brown wrapping paper, a roll of heavy-duty packing tape, and a set of a dozen small, sturdy cardboard boxes. Third, and most importantly, I needed more dirt. George, the hunter who had found me, had left me his phone number. He had visited me in the hospital, a kind, quiet man, embarrassed by the title of hero the local paper had given him. I called him. "George," I said, my voice now strong and clear. "It's Iris Thorne." He was delighted to hear from me. I thanked him again, profusely, for saving my life. And then I made a strange request. "George," I said, "I need a favor. A very unusual favor. I need you to go back to the cabin." "Con indica idea." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Ma'am, are you sure? There's nothing there for you." "Oh, there is, George," I said. "There's something there I need. I need you to take a shovel and a large box. I need you to dig up the earth from the clearing in front of the cabin, the place where you found me. I need you to fill the box with that earth and mail it to me." The silence on the other end was long and profound. I could hear him breathing, processing the sheer bizarre nature of my request. I am sure he thought the old woman had finally lost her mind. It's very important to me, George," I said quietly. "That place, it's sacred ground. I need to have a piece of it with me." He was a simple man, a man of the earth. He did not understand my motives, but he understood the concept of sacred ground. "Okay, Iris," he said finally. "If it's that important to you, I'll do it for you." A week later, a large, heavy box arrived at my new apartment. It was filled with the dark, rich, loamy soil of the Appalachian Mountains. It smelled of life and decay, of rain and stone and a million years of silence. It smelled of my grave. I spread a plastic sheet on the floor of my small apartment, and I dumped the earth out. I ran my hands through it. It was cool and damp. It was real. I was ready. I took the first of my small cardboard boxes. I carefully scooped a single cup of the dirt into it. Not too much. Just enough. I sealed the box and wrapped it neatly in brown paper. I wrote Lena's address on it in my neatest, clearest script. In the spot for the return address, I simply drew a small, crude sketch of a leaf. A maple leaf, like the ones that had been turning all around me on the day she left me. I walked to the post office, my heart beating with a slow, cold, steady rhythm. I placed the small, heavy box on the counter. The postal clerk waited. "Just this one package today, ma'am?" he asked, his voice bored. "Just this one," I said. "To start." I paid the postage and watched as he tossed the box into a large canvas bin. It was on its way. The first handful of her crime, the first piece of my tomb, was on its way back to the woman who had put me there. I didn't know what she would do, how she would react. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would know who it was from. And she would know that the dead do not stay buried forever. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Every Monday morning, I would walk to the post office and send another small, neat, heavy box to my daughter's luxury apartment in Charlotte. Sometimes I would just send the dirt. Other times, I would include a small symbolic object nestled within it. A single, smooth, gray river stone. A piece of birch bark, as pale and as thin as old skin. A bird's feather. A withered wildflower I had pressed in a book. Each item was a silent testament to the world she had abandoned me to, a world that I had conquered. I imagined the arrival of each box. I imagined Lena in her clean minimalist apartment, her world of white walls and polished steel, confronted with this small, persistent, inexplicable intrusion of the wild, dirty earth. What did she do with them? Did she throw them away in a panic? Did she open them with trembling hands? Did she understand the message? I got my answer about a month into my campaign. It came in the form of a phone call, an unknown number with a Charlotte area code. I let it ring for a long time before I answered. "Hello," I said, my voice calm. There was a long silence on the other end, filled with ragged, panicked breathing. Then, her voice, a choked, terrified whisper. "Mom?" "Yes, Lena," I said. "It's me." "Stop it," she sobbed, her voice cracking. "For the love of God, stop it. Every week, another box. How are you doing it? Are you dead? Is this a ghost? What is happening?" She thought I was dead. She truly believed that I had perished in that cabin, and that these packages were arriving from beyond the grave. The irony was so perfect, so exquisite, it was almost comical. "I'm not dead, Lena," I said, my voice as cold and as clean as a freshly dug grave. "No thanks to you. I just wanted to send you something. From the place you left me. I thought you might want to have a little piece of it, to remember our trip together." "And it's dirt!" she shrieked, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "You're mailing me dirt! It's insane! It's evil!" "No, dear," I corrected her gently. "It's not just dirt. It's evidence. Every box is a day I didn't die. Every grain of sand is a moment you left me to freeze, to starve. I'm just returning your crime to you, piece by piece, so you never, ever get to forget what you did." She was sobbing uncontrollably now, a torrent of terrified, self-pitying tears. "What do you want from me? Money? I don't have any money." "Nayin, and so, I don't want your money, Lena," I said. "You already took all of mine. No, I want something far more valuable. I want your peace of mind. I want your sense of safety. I want you to feel every single day the way I felt for 18 days in that cabin, alone, terrified, and haunted. I'm going to keep sending them every week. For the rest of your life, every week a little piece of my grave will arrive at your door, and you will have to touch it. You will have to dispose of." I hung up the phone. The final act of my revenge was planned for the 1-year anniversary of the day she left me in the woods. For a full year, I sent the boxes. 52 small packages of earth, stone, and leaves. 52 reminders. I imagined her life unraveling, her pristine apartment tainted by the constant arrival of the dirty, primitive world she had tried to escape. I imagined her paranoia, her fear of the mailman, her descent into a private, well-deserved hell. For the final package, I prepared something special. It was a larger box. Inside, I placed a much larger quantity of the dirt. And nestled in the center of the earth, I placed the faded, leather-bound journal my husband, Ben, had kept during the year he built the cabin. On the first page, he had written, "For my Iris and my Lena, a place of peace, our legacy." And on top of the journal, I placed a single, perfectly preserved, pressed wildflower. An Appalachian avens, a rare and beautiful flower that grows only at high elevations. a flower I had taught Lena to identify when she was a little girl. I wrote a short, simple note on a piece of clean, white paper. You tried to bury me in our legacy. But you see, my dear, I'm the one who knows how to grow things in the dark. This is the last box. Your haunting is over. Now, you get to live with yourself. I sent the package and I waited. I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know if she would have a breakdown, if she would try to find me, if she would simply continue to crumble. All I knew was that I had done what I needed to do. I had balanced the books. 2 weeks later, a thick envelope arrived at my apartment. It had no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a cashier's check, made out to me, for a very large sum of money. It was not all of the money she had taken, but it was a significant portion. And tucked into the envelope with it was a single, dried, pressed wildflower, an Appalachian avance. There was no note. There were no words. There was nothing else. I never heard from her again. I don't know if the money was an act of repentance or a desperate attempt to buy my silence, to make the ghosts go away for good. I don't know if she found peace or if she is still living in her own private wilderness of guilt. I don't really care. I took the check. I used it to buy a small piece of land with a little greenhouse, a place to put my hands back in the soil. Not the soil of a grave, but the soil of a garden. A place to grow things again. My revenge was not about hatred. It was about justice. It was about forcing someone to look at the ugliest parts of themselves, to touch the dirt of their own soul. She tried to make the wilderness my tomb. But she forgot. I am a child of that wilderness. I am made of its resilience, its patience, its quiet, unforgiving memory. You can never bury a woman who is already one with the earth. If you have been wronged, if you have been left in a dark place to be forgotten, remember this. The ground beneath your feet is not just dirt. It is history. It is strength. It is evidence. And sometimes, the only way to make someone understand the depth of the grave they dug for you is to send it back to them, one handful at a time. Thank you for listening to my story. It has been a hard one to tell. It feels good to finally let it see the sun. Please, show your support for our channel by liking this video, subscribing, and clicking the notification bell. In the comments below, tell me about a time you found strength and resilience in a way that surprised even you. Your stories are a testament to the wild, unconquerable spirit that lives in all of us. Love you all. This is Grandma Iris, and I'll see you in the next story.